The French Revolution began with a problem. At the time, France was divided into three parts: the first, second, and third estate. The people in the third estate, even though it was 95% of the French population, had the most awful living conditions. Also, enlightened thinkers of the time period continued to urge to limit the powers of Catholic Church aristocracy and monarchy. Since the King of France at the time already had tremendous debt, he decided to call a meeting of the Estates General, in which representatives from each estate would come together and have one large meeting. Frustrated from the fact that nothing was being done at the Estates General, the Third Estate declared themselves as the National Assembly on July 17, 1789. By August, the National Assembly adopted the Declaration of Rights of Man, which included many enlightened ideas. Many documents were written and passed, such as the August Decrees. August Decrees released all peasants from feudal contracts. Another was called the Civil Constitution of Clergy, which broke ties with church and also stated that church bishops were to be elected by the people. Because of the Declaration of Pillnitz, a small group of people called the Grenadiers decided to call war on Prussia and Austria. The war went badly, of course, due to the lack of men and other factors. Another group, known as the Radicals or the Jacobins, led by Maximilien Robespierre, took over control. As Robespierre became increasingly concerned with counter-revolutionary threats, he instituted a brutal period of public execution known as the Reign of Terror. In July 1794, Robespierre was executed, and another period came called the Thermidorian Reaction. The Thermidorian Reaction brought the revolution back into focus to help benefit the business class of France. As the Thermidorian Reaction took place, an executive branch known as the Directory was set into place as well. Many favored against this branch. The Directory was overthrown by Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon's accession marked the end of the French Revolution.
The beginning of the American Revolution began with a series of new and unfair taxes that pushed the colonists over the edge, driving them to protest and rebel. At this time, Britain was in heavy debt from the French and Indian War, despite the fact that they won. As a result, Britain levied large unfair taxes on their colonists. Before the end of the French and Indian War, the colonists had been very independent as a whole, and after the war, Britain led soldiers in America as a way of strictly enforcing the taxes and saving money on their military. While American frustration grew, European Enlightenment ideals were being imported to the colonies. In particular, John Locke's ideas of unalienable rights. These principles, among others, pushed the colonists to disagree with the British government and to begin to ponder the idea of independence. The Boston Massacre, the first true rebellion of the American Revolution, happened on March 5, 1770. This is a small event, despite the name, but played a large significance in the history of the American Revolution. At this time, more Enlightenment thinkers were speaking out and pressing their ideas, and the Americans were really coming to realize that these ideals supported their ideas of freedom. The Tea Act in 1773 caused the Boston Tea Party, a major rebellion that became the first of many large, organized uprisings against the British. Although colonist loyalties were split between loyal to Britain and the desire for freedom, they were well on their way to independence. In 1775, George Washington was elected the head of the Continental Army, and the war for America's independence became a realistic goal for the colonists. George Washington, as well as other leaders in both Britain and America, were well schooled in Enlightenment ideals, which made them popular with the masses. The leader of the British Army at the time was General Howe. The tipping point of the American Revolution came when France recognized America's independence and joined the revolution, siding with the Americans. France provided troops, funds, and other assets that helped America establish dominance over the vast British army. The northern and southern states were slightly independent from each other because of the distance between them and the difference in economics, but they used their strong Protestant ties to bind themselves together to work towards a common goal. With help from the French army, the Americans were able to secure the victory and their independence from England on July 4, 1776. On that day, the Declaration of Independence was finished and released as the document that formally cut American ties with Britain. Drafted by Thomas Jefferson, the Declaration of Independence informed Britain that America was its own country, and it granted personal freedom for all citizens, as well as granting all citizens a say in government. The Declaration of Independence was a very strong document that left the British little room for argument, backed up with Enlightenment ideals and the promise of their country a balance of powers in government, things the British couldn't offer. George Washington was appointed the first president, and despite the fact that the Brits still held a small part of America, and that America was still getting on its feet and developing, he did a marvelous job of getting America going and establishing a powerful country.
In France, the Third Estate people were taxed unreasonably high and had excess tax on small things such as soap and even playing cards. In American colonies, colonists were forced to pay excessive taxes on most goods, some including tea, paper products, and imported items. In France, many people were forced to be Catholics. In American colonies, there was religious freedom. You could practice any religion without the government enforcing anything. In France, during July and August of 1788, rural peasants began to revolt against their feudal landlords and wreaked havoc in the French countryside. In the American colonies, the Boston Massacre took place on March 5, 1770. This was the first real uprising against the British soldiers. In France, the people from all three states wanted a government reform because living conditions were bad, the country was in debt, and many people wanted more freedom and power. In the American colonies, the colonists wanted independence from their mother country, Great Britain. Britain was unfairly taxing their colonists while not providing them with representation in their government or basic human rights.
In France, philosophical letters written by Voltaire described his thoughts on how social barriers in France were much greater than of England, and also talked about his dislikeness of the absolute government. Other documents were also written, such as the August Decrees, which freed peasants from their feudal contracts. The Civil Constitution of Clergy was also written by the National Assembly in July 1790 that broke ties with the Catholic Church and established a national church system in France with the process for the election of the general. In American colonies, a pamphlet called Common Sense was written by Thomas Paine, available for the masses. This pamphlet introduced Enlightenment principles to the colonists and inspired new ideas about freedom from oppression, natural rights, as well as challenging the British government's authority. In France, the documents and uprisings involved religious aspects such as the Civil Constitution of Clergy, which angered the Catholic Church officials, and the Pope, which led to many French Catholics turning against the revolutionaries. In American colonies, religion played a much smaller role in the battles and documents and uprisings. In France, as Napoleon marked the end of the French Revolution, the new Constitution of 1795 and the Declaration of the Rights of Man are already in place and begin to be enforced. In American colonies, the Declaration of Independence marked the end of the Revolution. Written by Thomas Jefferson, this document was infused with Enlightenment ideals, ideas of freedom, and people having the power in the country. The results of the French Revolution were 1. Privileges of churches were attached, 2. A new constitution, and 3. Parliament limited the king's power. The American Revolution results were 1. A new country formed, the United States of America, 2. A new international power established, 3. France forms an ally with the United States with the help of Benjamin Franklin, and 4. America establishes a new way of government, one which will prove to be wildly successful.